Hello there! This video is the next step, the sequel to my original occupations tier list that I did quite a while ago, which so many of you really seem to love. Build 42 has been out for quite some time, and to be honest, I would have done this way sooner, but I felt that Build 42 needed some time to cook a bit. And cook it has. IndieStone has been making a metric ton of changes and updates since Build 42 released, which is both amazing and surprising at the same time. And I wanted to see just how these changes would affect the mid to late game before doing the tier list. Back when I did the first one, nothing, if anything, actually changed in the game, so there wasn't much need to change it. Now, with Build 42 adding in all the new systems like animal husbandry, firearm changes, blacksmithing, and more, some occupations that I originally ranked on the lower end may now be better than we think. Before we get started with everything, I realized that we have surpassed the 10k subscriber mark, which is crazy, as I never expected this channel to gain as much traction as it has. And I owe it all to you, my dear survivors, so thank you so much for your support on this channel and my videos. It means the world to me. Anywho, let us begin. So before we get into the meat of all of this and see the new rankings, let's go through some of the parameters that I used when making this tier list. The first thing is, and I feel that I should mention this before some people may pick up their pitchforks and torches if I rank something wrong according to them, is that even though I tried to be as fair as I possibly could for each occupation, it's tough to create a definitive list given how rapidly Build 42 is changing. At the time of recording this video, we are still in unstable, so things may still be flipped on their head in the next few months, or it could remain the same. Only time will tell. These rankings are based on a solo playthrough because officially, multiplayer for Build 42 isn't here yet, and we have no idea of how long it will be before it does arrive. Co-op will naturally change a lot of these rankings, so keep that in mind for when co-op lands. What is a D tier in solo could very easily become an S with the right friend group. I also must mention that the rankings were based on the Apocalypse preset with no additional trade points added to create a fair playing field for the test. Naturally, you can customize your sandbox settings and your traits to your heart's content. All of these traits were done by working off of just the base bonuses on the occupations themselves and not which traits we can pair them with. That is up for you to decide at the end of the day. So what this means is, if an occupation is too niche to be chosen outside of pure roleplay or when multiplayer does arrive, then naturally it will be ranked lower than something that, say, will give you a strong early game and actually continue to help you throughout your playthrough, not just in the late game. Like I said before, there are a lot of new mechanics that were added in the Build 42 update, and so these rankings are designed in such a way to at least give you a good early to mid game so you can get to experience all that Build 42 has to offer. My hope is that this list will stand the test of time, despite most of the future changes coming to Build 42. And finally, remember the golden rule. This game is a sandbox game, and because of this, you can play it however you want to at the end of the day. There is no true right or wrong way to play this game, just how you choose to write your own story. So, just because I ranked an occupation as D tier does not mean that you cannot try it out or that it's not worth trying out. Experiment and play around, make mistakes, it's part of the fun and how you learn. But if you're stuck and need a bit of inspiration, I hope this tier list can help you. So once again, in no particular order, let's get stuck in. Let's start off with an occupation that on my last tier list I put in S tier. That's right, it's unemployed. Sorry, I meant custom occupation. Because of how stable Build 41 was, we could get away with quite a lot. Build 42 is considerably harder, and I think that if you want the best possible start to your game, picking something like Unemployed just isn't it. The unique traits that come with some of the other occupations have even more of an impact in Build 42 over 41, so it's safe to say that I will be slotting this one in B tier for Build 42 single player. Still a great choice if you really want to create your own character from scratch though. You will just have to get creative on how you build your character, especially considering the changes to the positive and negative traits in Build 42. Next is good old Fire Officer. Fire Officer is an occupation that I still consider to be a really solid all-rounder. Giving +1 to axe, sprinting, strength and fitness, it gives you a head start in core skills that will help lessen the effects of the new muscle fatigue system, and help you recover from extended melee combat quicker. Pair this with the right traits and you will be just fine in combat, unless you do something stupid. It also has the added benefit of a fire station spawn in Rosewood if that is your favorite place to set up shop. With the arrival of Build 42, a lot of the occupations got some tweaks to accommodate the new mechanics. My only gripe with the Fire Officer in Build 42 is that it doesn't have some form of maintenance boost. Given that every weapon now has multiple steps we need to go through to keep them in top condition, I feel that maintenance will be a very important skill, especially for your early to mid game. Indie Stone did remedy this by putting in some skill books to help with maintenance, but even then it brings Fire Officer down a notch. A great choice though if you wanted a balanced melee focused character with room for customization, as it starts you off with a zeroed out point balance. So in Build 42 Solo, Fire Officer is a strong B tier in my opinion. The new gun and general ballistic changes have changed the way we use firearms in a big way, which some players either love or hate. Combat overall is pretty different, and if you're someone who likes to use firearms and use them early in a playthrough, then Police Officer may be the occupation for you to take. Police Officer didn't see any updates to it in Build 42, and for good reason. Build 41, I would still say it's S tier for firearm focused characters. However, now that panic affects your actual hit chance instead of just your crit chance, things start to look a little different. The +3 to aiming and the +2 to reloading is the single biggest boost to these core skills when it comes to firearms. The +1 to nimble is where this occupation will shine, making you start out with a naturally faster combat stance when compared to other occupations. However, now that panic and other factors like muscle strain affect your character's ability to wield guns, makes me think that Veteran might be a slightly better choice due to the desensitized trait. Police Officer is slightly cheaper than Veteran, coming in at -4 starting points, and foraging wise it doesn't have much to write home about. It only gives you an additional 10% chance to find weapons and ammo and not much else. Go figure. At least you do get the chance at a police station spawn though if you do pick Police Officer. Police Officer was S tier in my last list, but this time round I would say it is a very strong A. Park Ranger. Before I would have recommended this one for players who are wanting to live far away from civilization, and now with the new heat maps it may be a little easier. Park Rangers inherently have a +2 bonus to foraging. Since I made the last tier list, I found that foraging is actually pretty good, and you can find most if not all items through foraging, including a small chance to find a katana. So if you haven't yet tried a foraging build or haven't yet dived into foraging, I'd suggest you give it a go. It's oddly satisfying. Aside from the actual +2 bonus and the 100% XP boost to foraging, they also have a load of foraging bonuses focused heavily on wilderness-based items, which you are going to need if all you want to do is touch grass and not concrete. Top that off with +2 to trapping, +1 to axe and carpentry, and 30% faster movement speed in trees, leaves Park Ranger as a pretty decent choice for a wilderness-focused playthrough, but for an urban one, there are better choices that will give you more and won't be so expensive. Still, it's a solid B in my opinion. Construction Worker is in a really good space from what I can see. In Build 41, you have an occupation that gives you +1 to carpentry and +3 to short blunt, which would make it the go-to for short blunt builds. And from what I can see, short blunt is performing quite well in Build 42. As if that wasn't good enough, Construction Worker in Build 42 saw some extra spice by gaining +1 to maintenance for longer lasting weapons, and +2 to masonry, which is essential for building stronger structures, along with things like the furnace and the kiln sooner. It packs a lot for how little it costs, and you can make up for other shortfalls through the right combination of traits. Construction Worker is very similar to its sister occupations, Carpenter and DIY Expert, in the value that they bring in Build 42. So it is a very tough choice between which one is arguably better. Construction Worker is still very heavily focused on short blunt, so it would be a great choice if that is your preferred flavor of weapon, while also giving you some utility to help you in other areas and is not too expensive either. All things considered, it is a strong A tier. For Build 42, Security Guard will make it so that you basically won't need to sleep. The Night Owl unique trait that is exclusive to Security Guard helps you recover from tiredness much quicker, which equals less sleep. Someone from my comments made mention that apparently Night Owl also has a hidden modifier which helps you see better at night. This can also be combined with Cat's Eyes and the Wakeful trait to create a character that will require very little sleep and also will see much better in Build 42's darkest whack nights. In terms of XP boost, Security Guard comes in with +1 to light-footed for presumably less sound when moving about, and then +2 to running, which was known as sprinting in Build 41. The stealth system was supposedly overhauled in Build 42, but from what I've experienced, it's fairly similar to Build 41 in its current state. So I don't think the light-footed bonus is that good. However, it could change slightly after this video is released, we will have to see. The running bonus might make up for it slightly, however if you are playing on fast shamblers or even at random speeds, 95% of the time you can outrun the Zeds simply by walking and conserving your stamina, which is extremely important in Build 42 given the way exhaustion works. A quick heads up if you want to try Security Guard, Night Owl will have you needing to set an alarm to wake up at a reasonable time. If you are someone who likes to play with the deaf trait, your character will not be able to hear that alarm, so that is something to keep in mind. So, aside from the Night Owl trait, Security Guard is still really bare bones and doesn't offer you much else aside from staying awake slightly longer. For Build 42 single player, I would say Security Guard is a C tier in my opinion. Oh boy, it's Carpenter. Build 41, Carpenter was a base building gigachad, albeit pretty niche given that it was heavily focused on base building with a smidgen of short blunt. Carpenter has seen some love in the midst of all the Build 42 updates. Now it not only comes in with +3 to carpentry and +1 to short blunt, it now also gives +1 to carving, maintenance, and masonry. At a high level overview, these skills seem to serve as the foundation to a lot of the later crafting mechanics that were added. A bunch of weapon crafting recipes rely on carving to make handles and more, masonry for stronger structures, maintenance because it's one of the strongest skills in my opinion. That, and we now have to worry about keeping multiple weapon components in top condition. Maintenance is important for us to have, to worry about that less. Aside from these new skill boosts given to Carpenter, it still nets us an additional point to spend, which makes it a pretty good option for a solid game start in my opinion that will look after you well into your playthrough. Like I said before, it was a really tough choice between Carpenter, DIY Expert and Construction Worker over which one comes out on top, as they are so similar. But given the fact that Carpenter gives you everything that both DIY Expert and Construction Worker do, and still leaves you with an additional point to spend, puts Carpenter ahead in my opinion. So what was once a C tier in Build 41 now sits at a comfortable S tier in Build 42. Burglar is still a phenomenal choice for players who want to get a head start much sooner because you can hotwire vehicles straight off the rip, once you find a screwdriver, that is. If the new stealth system actually works as intended once it's been polished a bit more, Burglar will possibly be the best choice for players who prefer a stealth-based approach, as it gives us +2 to light-footed and +2 to sneaking. The +2 to nimble is a massive boost to general combat because it will make your base combat stance much quicker, quieter, and help level a skill that takes forever to do so. One could argue that all you need to do is get 2 points in mechanics and 1 point in electrical and you can hotwire cars. This is absolutely fine as well, as doing it that way gives us more room to pick different occupations and traits that will benefit us later. If you can't be bothered and want to get a set of wheels as fast as possible, then Burglar is your go-to. However, as much as I loved Burglar for Build 41, I hate to say it, but in Build 42 it is an A tier occupation. It's pretty expensive with -6 points, but picking Burglar helps with the early game in a big way, with the boost to nimble. But the hotwiring aspect will fall off later on as you level your skills. Chef! If you've watched my Build 41 tier list, then you will know that I believe cooking isn't strictly a necessary skill to hard focus on leveling. What I mean by that is you will passively level it up just fine by making various dishes as time goes on. And of course, we can't forget about life and living for the first week, which should put you at around level 5 cooking at least, assuming that you've watched each episode and you found a lucky skill book or two. Chef in Build 42 is actually looking a little better. With the addition of animal husbandry and proper hunting mechanics, Chef now has +1 to butchering, aside from its other bonuses of +3 to cooking, +1 to maintenance, and of course, +1 to short blade. This hasn't changed its base cost though, which is still pretty expensive for what it offers at -4 starting points. My stance on cooking still stands that unless you're someone who really enjoys cooking, I feel that there are better options to pick from that will give you a bit more versatility. Unless of course multiplayer rolls around and you want to put on your apron to be your group's dedicated cook, then go for it. For Build 42 solo however, this one goes in C tier. This next one is long hailed as arguably the best occupation for players who want to focus on spears for their playthrough. I am talking about none other than Repairman. Now known as DIY Expert in Build 42. Spears are really good now, and Build 42 brought in a bunch of new spear crafting options for us to use. So it goes without saying that DIY Expert is in a pretty solid spot. Aside from the original +1 to carpentry, +2 to maintenance, and +1 to short blunt, it now comes in with +1 to carving and +1 to masonry, which makes it a pretty strong contender to carpenter and construction worker, as all of these occupations are extremely similar now. The only reason why I wouldn't rank this one higher than carpenter is due to how expensive it is. The +2 to maintenance is really attractive for spear builds, or any weapon build for that matter. And you do get the knowledge to craft a bunch of weapon recipes from the start, but it does start you off with -4 points, which, taking into account how similar these three occupations are, makes DIY Expert an A tier in my opinion. So this brings us to one of the brand new occupations that was added with the Build 42 update, Livestock Farmer. It seemed appropriate to put an occupation that deals with animals with all the new animals that were added. Now, at the time of me writing this script, I haven't delved into the new animal system in a long enough playthrough to speak with full confidence on it. But I can see from the whisperings on the grapevine and Reddit that if you wanted to use domesticated animals to sustain yourself in your playthrough, it works out to be a very beneficial way of surviving. It just takes long. Renewable meat sources, leather, milk for cheese, wool, the list goes on. Build 42 offers you a lot of options for you to sustain your character. Or if you just wanted to fulfill your dream of owning a ranch/farm with lots of animals, then this is the occupation to do it with. But then again, depending on how your playthrough goes, you may need to wait a long while before you can actually make use of your occupation's bonuses. It gives +1 to agriculture, +3 to animal care, and +3 to butchering, and isn't too expensive for an occupation with a strong focus on animals, with it only costing -2 points. Given that this is a new occupation and will appeal to players who want to focus heavily on the new animal system, I'd say that it is a comfortable C tier in my opinion. Now for the Livestock Farmer's sister role, Crop Farmer. Simply called Farmer back in Build 41, my sentiments on Crop Farmer haven't changed much since the last tier list. It still gives +3 to agriculture, which makes it way too niche for a skill that could be very easily leveled up over time by actually touching grass to plant things, which normally happens much later on in the playthrough anyway. So unless you are picking this one for pure roleplay purposes or when Build 42 multiplayer finally rolls around, you're picking it to be the dedicated farmer of your group, I would not recommend this for a solo playthrough. There are simply too many stronger options out there. Crop Farmer goes straight to D tier. Yet another occupation that underwent an identity crisis. Angler, which was known as Fisherman in Build 41, has changed only in name. It still gives you +3 to fishing and +1 to foraging. Fishing has always been a really solid way to sustain yourself food-wise, and with the new fishing minigame, it makes it a bit more interactive. However, for a solo playthrough, Angler is once again a very niche pick. In most cases, you will start fishing later on in your playthrough, so taking an occupation like Angler, which sets you back -2 points, won't do anything to help you throughout your playthrough. You can grind these skills just fine with the right skill books and just doing the activity. In my opinion, this is an occupation that's better suited to multiplayer than a solo playthrough, just given its niche focus. So for that reason, I will put it in D tier. Ah, good old Doctor. There were barely any changes to the first aid system in Build 42, and neither did my original viewpoint of Doctor change much. The +3 to first aid only really helps with the healing speed of broken bones, which, if you are careful, you won't be getting too many of those. The +1 to short blade is probably its only redeeming quality, especially considering the new muscle fatigue system and short blades generally having a very low stamina requirement. But until there is a drastic overhaul to the vanilla first aid system, Doctor will be great as an RP character or playing as the dedicated doctor to your group once multiplayer eventually rolls around. For solo play, it is a D tier. This brings us to the one and only Veteran. It's always been a close call between police officer and veteran when it comes to which one is the best occupation for a firearm focused character. If you are playing Build 41, I still think that policeman is slightly better due to you gaining a form of desensitized over time. It's not completely like veteran's desensitized trait, but rather your natural panic reduction increases as time goes on, so it functions similarly to desensitized. However, in Build 42, I would say different. Build 42 is by default more difficult than Build 41 because the whole aim of the update is to purposefully slow us down and push us to make smarter choices when engaging in fights. So with the recent firearm overhauls, and especially the fact that panic now affects your actual hit chance instead of just your critical chance, veteran might just be the way to go for firearm builds now. Being immune to panic right out of the starting gate makes early game combat much easier and also helps consistently as time goes on. Aside from the desensitized trait, veteran also gives you +2 to aiming and to reloading, with a hefty 50% foraging boost to finding ammunition, which helps a lot with learning to use firearms faster. If you're willing to deal with panic via beta blockers or some other method, then Policeman will be slightly better because it gives you +1 to nimble, so your fighting stance will be a little faster. The only drawback of veteran is how damn expensive that panic immunity is. You'll start off with -8 starting points, so you'll have to pick your other traits carefully. For the simple quality of life benefit of desensitized, specifically for Build 42 solo, you can't go wrong with picking veteran as a firearm focused character. For this, I shall put it in S tier. Next up is the other medically focused and also very niche choice occupation, nurse. I don't know what to tell you, this is one of those occupations that is great for roleplay and not much else. Doctor will at least offer you some skill to short blade, but as it stands, I feel like nurse is in a position to offer us not much in the way of benefits. First aid will be leveled up over time, and the +1 to light-footed is nothing to go crazy for. At least it gives you +2 points to spend, so there's that. I just really hope that over time they buff some of the occupations that really need some love, like doctor and nurse for example. For a solo playthrough, straight to D tier. For those of you who have been following me for a while, you probably have figured out that Lumberjack was one of, if not my favorite occupation of all time. Build 41, it simply made too much sense. Axes were and still are pretty strong, and the increased swing speed combined with the right positive traits turned your character into a zomboid killing powerhouse. But now, in Build 42, Lumberjack is looking even better. Aside from getting the +2 to axe, +1 to strength, the Axpert unique skill, which gives you a faster swing speed and faster movement speed through trees along with less muscle strain, we also now have +1 to maintenance, which is huge. Considering that every weapon now has multiple components that we need to ensure stays in top condition, maintenance will help a lot. You still may kill far less Zeds than in Build 41 due to muscle strain being a factor, but it will still be hard to pass up Lumberjack as a melee choice if you like axes. It also stays at a zeroed out point balance, so you just got extra perks for nothing. This time round, Lumberjack goes in S tier. Now for Fitness Instructor. Fitness Instructor has always been a bit of a weird one for me. On one hand, I would consider it to be one of the top choices if I were to play a sprinter playthrough. On the other hand, for normal shambler playthroughs, I still feel it is wildly expensive for what it offers. Considering the new muscle fatigue system and how a combination of fitness, strength, and weapon proficiency affect the rate at which your muscles get fatigued, I feel it would perform better in Build 42 compared to Build 41. As I said before, you will almost always be able to outpace shamblers by simply walking, which works out better for your overall stamina in the end. Fitness Instructor gives us +3 to fitness and +2 to running. Before, it used to give +2 to sprinting, which is kind of counterintuitive to what we spoke about before. Here's where I feel Fitness Instructor falls short overall. It comes with a nutritionist unique trait which allows you to see the nutritional values of all food items, not just packaged items. This trait is essentially overcome by simply taking a gander at the wiki and figuring out which food items have the appropriate calorie levels for your character. In my opinion, that makes Fitness Instructor a very niche pick that is phenomenal for sprinters, but is left in the dust behind other occupations for non-sprinter playthroughs. Not to mention, it starts you off with -6 points with not that much value. For this reason, C tier. If you asked me which occupation I would personally recommend for a short blade focused build, it most probably will be this one. Compared to Chef, which gives you +1 to butchering and +3 to cooking, Burger Flipper is very similar, with +2 to cooking and +1 to maintenance and short blade. The plus side is that Burger Flipper is significantly less expensive overall. It gives you +2 points to spend compared to Chef's -4. Aside from that, the only things here that I reckon are actually worthwhile is the +1 to maintenance and short blade. Build 42's new repair system means repairing things like knives and various other weapons has turned into a much more in-depth process, so any bit of maintenance outside of the new skill books is appreciated. Even so, unless you are specifically going for a short blade build, which may not be a bad idea considering the new muscle fatigue system, I still think Burger Flipper is more suited to co-op play when you have other friends to pick up the slack where your build lacks. But at the end of the day, You do you. For this reason, Burger Flipper is going into a solid B tier for build 42 solo. So now we get to Electrician. In my humble opinion, this is about as niche of a pick as you can get. Except if you are the kind of masochist who likes picking illiterate, then Electrician is kind of a must pick. It gives +3 to electrical, which granted takes ages to level. The reason why I say this one is a must pick for you if you choose to play with illiterate is that, in case you didn't know already, Electrician can operate generators without having to find the respective magazine. This is important because your character cannot even read them if you do find them. It's also pretty expensive at -4 starting points, so I can confidently say that there are better occupations out there. So unless you are among the select few who likes to make life difficult for yourself by taking something like illiterate, Electrician goes in D tier. Next up we have the Engineer. Engineer has the benefit of being able to create pipe bombs and other various traps right out of the gate. Bombs in PZ, they are good for messing around, but often they will cause damage to structures if you aren't careful, and more often than not, damage the loot within. Fire can get out of control pretty quickly in PZ, so use your noggin when using explosives. That said, the new ragdoll effects and their interactions with explosives will make for some really hilarious activities. Engineer will give you +1 to carpentry, electrical, and masonry, which makes it a pretty balanced occupation for multiplayer, I'd say. Single player, like I said, bombs are very fun to use when they work well, but in the end, starting with -4 points for something you might use very rarely makes Engineer border on niche in my opinion. C tier. Now for Welder, which was previously called Metalworker. Why is it now called Welder? Well, because now they have split general metalwork into welding and metalworking. Welding seems to affect mainly metal structures, and by the looks of it, most of the scrap armor recipes. Gathering all the required materials to do the recipes that require welding can potentially take a while if you are unlucky. So taking Welder will really only benefit you later on in the game. In my opinion, at least in the current state of build 42, this one is best picked for co-op when your friends can pick up the shortfalls and you can be the dedicated welding junkie. When co-op comes around, that is. It's also pretty expensive for an occupation with such a niche focus, coming in at -6 starting points, but at the end of the day, you do you. D tier. Next is, you guessed it, it's Blacksmith. Another one of the new occupations that were added to build 42 and is supposed to be the occupation that is now focused on metalworking, and for good reason. It gives +4 to metalworking and a tiny boost to maintenance. If you're someone who wants to get into the blacksmithing mechanics as soon as possible, then there are 2 ways that you can go about it. You could either pick Blacksmith, which will give you the boost that you need and will also come with the Blacksmith knowledge trait built in, which allows you to use anvils from the start. Or you can pick another occupation and take the Blacksmith knowledge trait that will allow you to do the same thing, just minus the boost to metalworking. I do like that there is an option to take it separately if you didn't want to go hardcore into blacksmithing, but picking Blacksmith also gives you access to a wealth of metal recipes from weaponry all the way to cookware. However, once again, the blacksmith occupation is very niche as it doesn't offer you benefits to much else other than crafting. So, great for co-op, but is overshadowed by some of the more versatile occupations, especially considering its cost at -6 starting points. I shall put this one in C tier. Time for mechanic. Another one of the occupations that, until co-op gets introduced to build 42, is a very niche pick. Let me tell you why. Picking mechanic gives you the knowledge to repair and maintain all vehicle types from the start. Through most of my playthroughs, I have stumbled across at least 2 of the magazines needed to learn how to repair cars, so it's safe to say it may be better to pick a different occupation and visit some bookstores or grind out junk cars to get your mechanics level up. Spend a few in-game days doing that and you will be just fine. Giving us +3 to mechanics and +1 to short blunt means that this occupation's focus is best used in co-op as the dedicated mechanic for the team. But of course, you can do whatever you want. With -4 starting points, it makes this occupation cost a pretty penny, especially when the amateur mechanic positive trait exists. For a single player run, I would say this will sit in C tier. And finally, the last occupation in the lineup, but certainly not the least, Tailor. Tailoring is such an important skill as properly reinforced clothes will keep you alive in many sticky situations. Now even more so considering how many of the new recipes require tailoring to actually do them. However, once again, purely focusing on tailoring as a starting build is a very niche pick, which would be phenomenal in multiplayer, but not so much in single player. Unless you're role-playing, of course, which is totally okay. But alas, this one goes in D tier. And that's it for the Build 42 tier list. I tried my best to make this list in such a way that it wouldn't be too affected by the likely changes to Build 42, but then again, things may change a little bit in the future. As always, remember, it is a sandbox game and it's meant to be played the way that you want to, so don't feel pressure to only pick the ones that are ranked highly. Experiment, it's half of the fun. Thank you so much for watching until the end, and if you agree or disagreed with anything that I said, don't feel afraid to put your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, stay safe, survivors, and I will see you in the next one.